The building blocks for this digital world that we all are increasingly living in is semiconductors.
We see consumption of semiconductors in Europe to almost double over the next 10 years until 2030 to roughly 80 billion euros, especially the leading-edge semiconductors.
The EU and the US are vulnerable to supply chain disruptions in today's market due to semiconductors. Read the newspapers. Car plants have to stop and cannot produce enough cars simply due to shortage of semiconductors. And that is the case for Europe.
The situation is quite urgent. If you look back a couple of years to 2003, there were 26 players capable of producing leading-edge chips, and many of them were European. Today, it's only 3 players left, and none of them is European.
The recommendations of the Carney study on the future of semiconductors in Europe are really threefold. In the first place, there's an urgent need to strengthen what we call the ecosystem for semiconductors production in Europe, with a particular focus on manufacturing and design. Number 2 is to focus that particularly on the leading edge semiconductors, so semiconductors less than 5 to 7 nanometers, the most advanced ones in the market, because that is where Europe lacks the most, where they're the most behind. And third and final, to do so requires the cooperation of both private enterprise, private companies and government. Companies will not be able to do it all on their own. Europe relies 100% on import. And for such a keystone technology, such a strategic technology, to be dependent on 2 countries that produce 70–80% of the leading edge chips on the other side of the world makes yourself vulnerable. Either Europe gets its act together and takes this big leap forward, or will risk getting further behind. It requires action quickly over the next months, not even years. And it will require substantial investments from many different parties and close cooperation between both the government and the private sector. The demand, the consumption of leading-edge chips is exploding, growing by 15% per year over the next years, driven by the growth of artificial intelligence, technologies like self-driving cars, advances in cloud computing and in mobile telephony and etc. All these technologies require particularly leading-edge chips. It will lead to many highly paid, highly skilled jobs. It will add billions and billions to the economy, and it will support a highly innovative industry that will not only influence and support the chip-making industry, it also supports the overall economic base.
A focus on leading-edge technology will have tremendous economic benefits. Investing in leading-edge chip-making will have benefits for multiple European industries. For instance, automotive. It would also benefit the network manufacturers like Nokia and Ericsson, who are today already working on 6G communication networks of tomorrow.
Government subsidies play a key role in this. It's what countries and regions like Korea, South Korea and Taiwan are doing. If you look at the total cost of ownership and you compare Europe with Taiwan and with South Korea, the 2 main suppliers at this moment in time, they are 30 to 40% cheaper. 80% of that cost differential is due to government subsidies.
I believe there's a good reason for governments to incentivize chip making. There is a need to act now in considering the time to plan, build and equip a fab. We would be almost in 2030 if we start today.
It's crucial to make these decisions now, not to wait another couple of years where we have the same conversation. That would simply not be sufficient.